Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to Stately Vaughan Manor, where Roger and I have returned for my weekend reading report. It's time for my weekend reading report, the thrill-packed show where I talk about all the stuff that I read during the past week. And I read some stuff. Not as much stuff as I would have liked, but that's literally always the case. But what did I read? Well, let me get out my list. I've got my list of the books that I've read for the 500 book challenge. The challenge where I must read 500 books that I own before I will buy any new ones. I still can't buy books. And won't be able to for quite some time, but that's okay. I got a lot of books. And what did I read this past week? Okay, so book 150. Book 150. Which one was that? That was A Call to Darkness. That's this book. This is a Star Trek The Next Generation book, which I read for Book Trek 2024, the Summer of Trek, or the Wrath of the Summer of Trek, where we spend all summer long reading Star Trek books. This was an event created by Vin over at Revenant Reads. And this is what I read. This is my first Book Trek book of 2024. Star Trek The Next Generation, A Call to Darkness by Michael Jan Friedman. A story which takes place during the second season of Star Trek The Next Generation. It's good. It's good. It's not great, but it's good. I have yet to read a great Star Trek The Next Generation book, or actually even a great Star Trek book. But this is a good one. And it's good because Michael Jan Friedman, he's a good writer. I can tell you that. This is a well-written book. He knows the characters. He gets the characters right. The thing that's not great about the book, it has a very basic Star Trek plot. This is just like any episode of Star Trek, but not one of the good ones, or not one of the great ones. It's just like, it would, if you saw this on television, it would be an okay episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. Certainly nothing to, really remember or want to watch again. But it was decent. It has a decent plot. However, it has some things, it has some plot holes. Let's put it that way. There are some things that would not withstand scrutiny if you looked at this plot too closely. And so this is like a Star Trek episode, only it's been stretched out to novel length. It seems very padded as far as the story is concerned. And, it's like I said, it's a good book. It's just not great. So it's a good book. It's good, but it's not like, oh man, that was fantastic. Like I said, will I ever have that experience reading a Star Trek book where it's like, damn, this is great? I don't know. We'll see. There's certainly been episodes that I felt that way about. I'm a big Star Trek fan, but this, not really. I feel like that if Michael Jan Friedman, he's a good enough writer that if he can come up with like a really good plot, he could write a pretty solid book, but this is not it. Possibly his other Star Trek The Next Generation books are, and I will check those out eventually, but, I read this, and it was okay. It was good. Not great. So I read that. That was book 150. What is next? I have to turn the page here. Can I manage to turn the page? There we go. Book 151 was a really good one. That was The Last Ride by Robert E. Howard, the greatest pulp writer of all time. And here, Robert E. Howard has some westerns that he wrote. It is June on the Range all month long. We're reading Western fiction, and June on the Range is still rollicking along. And I was supposed to read this last June on the Range, but didn't. So I thought I would read this. I have read this before, of course, but the last time I read this was probably in the 1990s. So it's been a while since I've read these stories. And this is a really good book. The first story is okay, which is actually The Last Ride, the title story. I say it's okay because it has a very basic Western plot. The hero of the story is kind of boring. The thing that saves it is the action. Robert E. Howard, fantastic with action, and there's a lot of great action in that story. It's, I think, the only story that was actually published in a pulp magazine. So The Last Ride was published in 1935 under the title Boot Hill Payoff in the magazine Western Aces, October 1935. Every other story in here, well, actually, that's not true. Vulture Sanctuary was published in 1936 for Argosy. But the other 4 stories in here were not published during Howard's lifetime, and they were not published in pulp magazines. They were published much, much later. But most of the stories in here are really, really good. I have a feeling that had Robert E. Howard lived, he could have been one of those Western writers who just pumped out a ton of Westerns like so many Western writers did. He was certainly moving in the direction of writing Westerns. He seemed interested in writing Westerns. His best-selling series at the time that he was dying was his Breckenridge Elkins series, which was a very popular series of humorous Westerns, kind of tall tales, which very vividly had the stamp of his personality on those stories. These stories are more straight Western stories that you would find in pulp magazines, and they're excellent. There's a couple of them that were really good. Knife, Bullet, and Noose was a really good story. Vulture Sanctuary was really good. Lost Shooters of Cowtown. Was there ever a Western story with a more Western title than Lost Shooters of Cowtown? That was pretty good as well. So, yeah, I recommend this book. If you ever find this lying around, Robert E. Howard's The Last Ride, you should pick it up. It's excellent. And this was a great entry this year for June on the Range. I really enjoyed it. So that was book 151. Book 152 was an entirely different kind of thing. Book 152 was this book. This is Frankenstein, Alive, Alive! Frankenstein, Alive, Alive. This was written by Steve Niles and Bernie Wrightson. The artwork is mostly by Bernie Wrightson, but there's some additional art by Kelly Jones. So, Bernie Wrightson, one of the greatest horror artists of all time, he is the co-creator of Swamp Thing. Excuse me while I adjust my crooked tie. He was the co-creator of Swamp Thing, and he also did a lot of work with Stephen King. He illustrated The Cycle of the Werewolf, and he did illustrations for the 1990s version of The Stand. And he also famously did this. This is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. This is an illustrated edition of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein that came out in the early 1980s from Marvel Comics. This is a Marvel illustrated novel. This has been reprinted a few times, although this is the first printing here. And this edition of Frankenstein is just incredible because of the detail of the artwork. It just has some magnificent artwork in it. I mean, look at the detail of the artwork here in this laboratory. It's just amazing. And this book is full of great illustrations. It's just a magnificent book. And it has become justifiably famous, actually, as one of Bernie Wrightson's greatest works, this illustrated edition of Frankenstein. And it has been reprinted. You can still get it, although the edition that you can get now is a more compact version of this. This is the full-sized Marvel illustrated novel, and it's amazing. But Frankenstein is a character that Bernie Wrightson always loved and he always meant to get back to, and he did in this. This is the last work that Bernie Wrightson ever did, Frankenstein, Alive, Alive. And it took him a long time to do this, and he did not finish it. He died before it could be finished, and he saw that coming. And so he asked Kelly Jones to complete this story. Kelly Jones was the person he felt could finish this. It's written by Steve Niles, although I think the plot was Bernie Wrightson's. And the artwork is really, really, really good. It's not quite as masterful as his earlier Frankenstein work, but it's pretty darn good. And the story is pretty good as well. It does leave you with the feeling that it is a bit incomplete. It feels like this was supposed to be a much longer story. But what I think happened is he just passed away before it could be finished. It starts off with a framing sequence where the Frankenstein monster is still alive and he's working at a carnival. And he is one of the freaks in the carnival. He is actually the Frankenstein monster in the carnival. And it's kind of cool, but they never go back to that framing sequence in this story. And that leads me to think that this probably was cut off short. Like, this was intended to be a much longer series. It only lasted 4 issues. And like I said, Kelly Jones finishes the story. But Bernie Wrightson left a lot of thumbnails and sketches showing how the story should be completed. And Kelly Jones worked from those thumbnails to complete the story, at least complete what was left from the artwork that Bernie Wrightson did for the story. And even these sketches at the end of the book that show you his original versions of these, those are pretty great. And then Kelly took those sketches and he completed the story with them. So this is Kelly here working from Bernie Wrightson's sketch. It's excellent. And it's too bad that it was really never finished. It does come to an abrupt ending. I really feel like this was going to be longer, but it was not to be. And like I said, it's worth checking out if you're interested in the character Frankenstein's monster and Bernie Wrightson's version of it. And also if you're interested in the artist, Bernie Wrightson, because like I said, this is the last thing that he ever worked on. And it's pretty great, especially considering that he was dying when he was doing a lot of this. It's pretty impressive. So Frankenstein, alive. This was pretty cool. So what am I reading right now? I am reading this for June on the Range, Stage to Painted Creek by Vetchel Howard. I got this for 10 cents. This cost me 10 cents, this book, over at Half Price Books years ago whenever I picked this up. It's one of the many Westerns I just picked up when I was out book shopping and never read. I've probably had this at least 10 years. At least, probably longer. But now I'm finally reading it, and it's pretty good so far. Another excellent Western that I'm reading for June on the Range. I'll give you a full report on this next week after I complete it. But so far, it's pretty great. The only way the marshal could save the stagecoach was to put guns in the hands of the 3 killers who were his prisoners. So, yeah, I'll be interested to see how this book turns out. It seems to be kind of rare. I haven't seen too many copies of this around. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it is. Also, of course, I am reading Thor. I'm continuing to read Thor. I'm reading every issue of Thor from the first run of Thor, which started in the early 1960s and went on through the mid-1990s. This is volume 18 of the Epic Collections. This contains Thor stories from 1990 to 1991. And I should finish this today. I'm going to try to complete an epic collection a week until I'm done. I've got a few left. And then I'll be done with the first run of Thor. I'd like to get it done by September because originally my plan was to finish Thor by October 4th because that's when I started, October 4th of last year. But I am probably leaving the country for a couple of weeks in September. So it would be nice if I had this all wrapped up before that time. So we'll see. But this is continuing the run by DeFalco and Ron Friends. And it's pretty good. It's a pretty good run of Thor. So I should be finishing this today. And then I'll be continuing it with the Thor War, which is volume 19 of the Epic Collections, 1991 to 1992. So Ron Friends continues his shenanigans on Thor. Looks like some interesting stuff coming up in this volume. And I will tell you more about this probably next week because, like I said, I should be finishing this today. And I think that's everything. I did get some stuff in the mail, but I'm going to be talking about that tomorrow. And I guess I will see you tomorrow. Okay, guys, I will catch you next time.